I've been walking beneath streetlights. I've been walking, cause I can't find peace on these nights. I've been walking, but my strides are getting slower. Still I'm walking, but I don't know where I'm going. I've been looking for love, but only found deception. Told my secrets to some people who have not kept them.
This is the Polish Ambassador, featuring the Grouch and Scott Nice. Don't get it twisted.
I might be conscious, still I like to fuck.
I like it.
Do a little yoga, then lift some weights up. I be as I'm supposed to, perfectly imperfect. Indulge in deep combo, get hype when she's...
Hey, what's going on? What's going on? Welcome to World Kidney News. I am your host, Steve Belcher. Boy, I tell you, it's good to be on, because I tell you, the last maybe 5-6 days, your boy been definitely under the weather, mentally and physically. And I'm not embarrassed to say that. We human. So that's what's been up with me, just trying to get myself back to 100%. And keep doing what I'm doing. Let me tell you, tonight is the night from Tuesday where I had to cancel. We got a great second half of the God Committee, Who Shall Live. Now tonight, I got the person who's done extensive research on this. But before I bring him on, let me just tell you how I met this gentleman. It was, 2019, maybe November, December, maybe October. He reached out to me. I didn't even know who he was. He reached out to me through Facebook because he saw what I was doing. And he was doing a project. And he just wanted to get my take on some questions that he had pertaining to transplant and what he was working on with kidney disease. And during this time, I was going through what I was going through. I just sold my house and big change in my life, moved back home and, downsized. And I didn't know who this guy was. So the spirit in me told me to reach out to him. And at the time, I had the idea and was trying to work on a film documentary, Urban Crisis, that I'm still working on. I don't have any film documentary experience, but I learned online what little I know. And we talked, and then I just went on my way, and he continued with his project, and here we are. And I went out, just happened to go out California several weeks ago and reached out to him and told him I was coming out there. And this gentleman, he doesn't even know me from a can of paint before I went out there, right? And he remembered my story, what I told him, and he invited me to his parents' house in Beverly Hills. Now, you're talking about a black guy from Washington, D.C. and a white gentleman out Beverly Hills, prominent, income probably astronomical. I don't know. He'll probably say no and be modest about it. But no, the point is, with stereotypes and perceptions, this gentleman welcomed me to his home. And we had the social distance and I stayed outside. But in retrospect, that touched me. And I'm just proud to call him a friend now, even though I met him on social media and everything that's going on in this country today between race and everything. I've never been racist. I was born and went to schools that were mixed. But with everything going on, this gentleman welcomed me into his life, into his home, and I would ever be so humble and appreciative to him for doing that. So let me just read you David's bio. David Krissman is an award-winning writer, director, producer, and editor in Los Angeles, California. His filmmaking credits include The Confession, The New Brit, and Moonlight Phantom. The Confession premiered at the Newport Beach Film Festival and was also featured on PBS, y'all. All right, Short Showcase. Krissman's thesis, when he was in school, his thesis film, The New Brit, had the honor of representing Loyola Marymount University at the Poitiers Film Festival in Morocco, a showcase of the best, I'm saying the best cinema made at film schools around the world. So this guy is top notch. Krissman is passionate about access to healthcare and currently producing an investigative podcast which talks the story of America's first and only experiment with universal health care, mainly kidney failure, and also what lessons, because there are lessons in this, we can learn to take to our larger system. So I'm going to give my buddy the special intro, and we're going to bring David right on. Here we go. David, we're finally here.
That was an amazing introduction.
Welcome, man. Welcome.
They're not off the charts rich. So.
But no, man, welcome, man. And again, man, thank you,
Sure.
For reaching out to me to be a part of what you were doing and just being a mentor, a friend, and welcoming me into, your setting.
My pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So how is it hot out there today?
It's not that bad. It's not that bad. It was hotter last week. It's cooled down a little bit, but yeah, still quarantining with my parents.
Yeah, man. God bless them, man. Tell them I said hello.
I will for sure.
Your mom and dad, man. It was a hot one when I was out there.
Yeah, I got bitten by like 10 mosquito bites or 10 mosquitoes. So we were out there. That was good pizza, so it was worth it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, David.
Yeah.
When I was reading your bio,
yeah,
nothing in there far as going through film school and your projects mention anything about kidney disease. How did the renal or kidney disease community become interest to you?
So I have always been a writer, basically, right? And what happened was I had just finished a script, I'd say in 2013. And in 2014, I was looking for something to write. And this New York Times article caught my attention. It was about pair donation. And if everybody doesn't know about pair donation, look it up. It's pretty incredible. It's basically transformed how people are matched with regards to living kidney donation. And at first, I didn't really. At first, it was just simply, how can I tell a compelling story? This seems interesting. But I started to learn more. I got a posse of doctors and people on the inside that were open and honest, partly because they weren't being quoted. There was, it wasn't like I was writing an expose. And what happened was the more I learned, the more passionate I became, the more I cared about how kidney disease is treated in our country. And it arguably has some of the worst incentives financially with regard to treatment. So so that's basically how it happened. It started out with a script, and then I wanted to tell more. I realized that there was too much I couldn't put in just a script format. So I decided that I was going to do a podcast too.
Wow. Now, David, this show, which is entitled Who Shall Live, the God Committee, which they were dubbed, how did you stumble upon
oh gosh,
that?
I don't even remember, but I was fascinated because, everybody remembers, or maybe people don't remember, but in 2000, was it like 10, when Barack Obama was trying to get healthcare passed in our country, Sarah Palin was all over the airwaves talking about there was going to be this life and death committee, and the government was going to decide who gets treatment. And then when I heard about this, I was like, oh, that sounds eerily familiar to what she was saying, but it was actually true. Unlike the BS that Sarah Palin was like spewing, there was this actual God Committee, or they were referred to as the God Committee, at the very beginning of dialysis in our country.
Can you share a little bit about that? What their purpose was and how they came to the decision of who lived and who died? Because, David, when I came out to California, my sole purpose was to come out there and shed light on the many dialysis units that have populated Southern California.
Right.
And I made a post today, yes, we do need dialysis clinics. Back in the 60s, the main disease causing renal failure was like polycystic kidney disease or something genetic. It wasn't diabetes or hypertension. Now here we fast forward 21st century, and you have all these clinics, and no one, right now, you don't have to, you got kidney disease, you have a choice to make, pretty much. Now, how fortunate are people now back from the 60s? Tell us about that. People actually died because they were denied dialysis.
Yeah, so basically what happened was, before the 1960s, dialysis was a thing, but it was only in hospital because it basically, the connector was made out of glass, or the shunt that they were using. And that just basically wreaked havoc on people's veins and arteries. And so it wasn't something that they could do over and over and over and over again, which is what we do today. And then there's this doctor named Belding Scribner, and he was haunted by a patient that he couldn't save. He knew that dialysis was this life-extending procedure. This guy came in, he could barely walk. I don't even think he could walk. And then I think, 3 treatments later, the guy was up walking around. And then they did, then they realized that they wouldn't be able to save his life because they couldn't continually repeat this over and over again. Then he wakes up in the middle of the night and he says, there's got to be something that we can do about this. And it was kind of like being in the right place at the right time with the right guy, because at that time, DuPont Chemical basically released what we today know as Teflon, which is what we use in our non-stick pans, I think, right? And that was a game changer. And so he developed what is known as the Scribner shunt, and then opened up a clinic. And of course, they had a huge problem because there were only, I believe, 3 dialysis machines in this clinic. And it was in the basement of what was I think a nurse's dormitory at the Swedish hospital. Because I think, before the 1960s, a lot of the nurses would just sleep at the hospital, right? But they were retrofitting the whole thing, and in the basement they put this this new clinic. But of course they had a problem, which is all these doctors wanted their patients to get access to it. And I think originally it was 1 every 50 people they could take, right? So maybe 1 out of 50, right? And so there was a lot of talk and questioning about how do they figure this out, about who to do it, about who to allow to have this treatment. And that is where we get to the God Committee. And the one of the doctors involved basically made calls to about 6 or 7 people, lay people. One of them was a surgeon, but didn't know much about nephrology.
Well, let me just say this before you move on, David. One was a lawyer, a minister, banker, housewife, state government official, labor leader, and like you said, and surgeon.
Right.
By the King, they were selected by the King County Medical Society.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So basically what happened was a lot of them didn't even want to be a part of this. They thought this is really morbid, and I don't want to, this to be on my shoulders. And
who would?
Nobody. Well, perhaps some sick people, but none of them really wanted to be a part of this at first. But and one of the ministers, I have it on my other computer screen. His name was John. The minister's name was John Dara, and he wrote kind of like a memoir article about his experience later on. And he refused at first, and then they said, "Hey, just come down to the hospital and let's talk about it. And if you still don't want to do it, no problem." And he said, he basically reasoned that that somebody had to make these decisions, and somebody did have to make these decisions.
Hey, David, can I interject right quick?
Yeah.
I had some research that I did, and Shayna Alexandra from Life Magazine did a story, and she was allowed access to the committee's deliberations that were secret. She had a snapshot of members' thinking that emerged. And the minister, he says, perhaps one man is more active in church work than another because he belongs to a more active church.
Right.
So when they be thinking, so you thinking that they pick people if they're more active in church? That could be a criteria as well.
Oh, there was a
favor for a person.
There was a ton of criteria. At first, it was proposed that nobody who was an ex-convict could be allowed. And actually, I think that minister was against it. He said, "No, we can't judge people by their past. We really need to judge them by their future." And so, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of them lost a lot of sleep over this. And the truth is, these doctors couldn't make the decision, right? Because they could only assess people's medical criteria, and they narrowed it down. But once they narrowed it down, there was still an overflow of people, and so they wanted some independent minds, kind of to do this. And they did have 2 physician advisors. And those 2 physician advisors basically said they gave them the recommendation that they should automatically reject patients over the age of 45.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and children.
I mean, that leaves a very narrow window.
Right, right. Well, they were afraid that children, it would be too scarring for children, like mentally, that like too tormenting.
So they just regularly let them die.
Yeah.
And that sounds kind of cruel, David. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
attempt.
right. I mean, when you compare it to nowadays, we think of who are we going to save first? It's going to be the children. And actually, children do get priority on our wait list for a kidney. They go right up to the top. So things have changed, and I don't know if they were. I don't think they were anti-children, but I don't think that they thought that they could emotionally and mentally take it.
Sure, I'm sure,
yeah.
Especially back then, you know, the technology is not like it is today. And I'm sure seeing a big machine like that, you know, whatever type of dialogue
Right.
and everything could be very, very scary back then, because looking at it now compared to back then, it's like a dinosaur.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was. So, yeah. So that's how.
Now, right. Go ahead, David.
Oh, no, go ahead. Ask the question.
No, now let's fast forward. Well, and so how did that God committee end? Because I know you say, and we're going to get into that it kind of still goes on today, but in the transplant arena.
Yeah.
In a sense.
In a sense, yeah. In a sense.
But right. But how did we move past that? What happened?
So Shane Alexander, the journalist, posted that Life magazine article. NBC did a documentary. There was kind of a national outcry as far as I can tell from my research. And then about 10 years goes by that this committee serves, and then 1972, the government decides to make this covered by Medicare. So the government will pay for every person, regardless how old you are. You could be a 2-year-old and be on Medicare if you have kidney failure. And the government will pay for your dialysis or for your transplant.
David, let me interject.
Yeah.
Now, this article, I just wanted to see if it was a date on here, but 2009. But the numbers is more than this, and I know you're vouch for this. It says the Medicare ESRD program has unquestionably prolonged lives. It has also grown far beyond the original estimates.
Oh, yeah.
From about 11,000 patients in 1974 at a cost of $229 million to about 527,000, including post-transplant patients in 2007 at a cost of $23 billion.
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead.
And that's why I think your advocacy matters. When they originally started this, they didn't think it was going to be big, but it basically ballooned into what is now literally 1% of our whole federal budget. I think back then it may have been like 1% of Medicare's budget, but now it's 1% of the whole federal budget. And to put that into context, the Department of Education is like 2 to 3% of the federal budget.
Wow.
We spend more money on kidney failure, the taxpayers, than we do the State Department and the Department of Energy, the department. All of these huge departments, all U.S. foreign aid, every year, and the reason why it has ballooned so much is because we have this epidemic that you're trying to raise awareness about.
Exactly.
With hypertension and diabetes. People aren't educated. They don't, and they're not educated about nutrition, about the importance of exercise, and they fall through the cracks of our medical system. So even if patients, even if their doctor sometimes says, hey, lay off the salts, they don't connect that with kidney disease, right? So, we have a very, very unhealthy population. A huge epidemic in obesity.
Okay. Guys, share this broadcast. Share this broadcast to 8 people. Just share it. That's all you gotta do. Hit the share button. But David, I want you to elaborate on what I'm about to read from Melissa Tuff, Kidney Warrior. She's, I believe, 2-time transplant recipient. I'm not sure, Melissa, if it's 1 or 2, but I'll find out when you come on the show, or you can tell me now. But she's fortunate enough to do dialysis at home.
Yeah.
Right. And she mentioned the dialysis come a long way. But she just made an interesting comment that I left on the screen. She says now the God committee just rules over who get transplant. Dialysis is a moneymaker, so everyone gets treatment now. Elaborate on that, because pretty much you pretty much say the same thing about transplants.
Yeah, well,
because education is not given when it should be to kind of get the ball rolling.
Right. Well, I think if you asked the God committee back then, or if they, they're all deceased now, but I think that if they were alive now and you said, wow, we have 600,000 people on dialysis, they would say, oh my God, that's great. Everybody's getting it, right? Because there's so much access. But now we know that transplant is lightning years better of a treatment than dialysis. And we don't have the right access to transplant that we should. And part of that is a misalignment of incentives, which is what my project is based on. But when Melissa's talking about now the God committees are the transplant centers, when patients want a transplant, usually they first need a referral by their doctor or their dialysis clinic. And so that's one obstacle. And so in a sense, that doctor is that nephrologist or clinic staff is basically using their own subjective judgment to say, hey, is this person a candidate or not? Because it is a subjective judgment. There are plenty, thousands probably, of patients that have gotten rejected by one transplant center, went to another one, and then they accepted them, and then they got transplanted. And the same goes for before they even get to the transplant center, which is their nephrologist doesn't talk to them about or educate them about transplant, so they ditch that nephrologist. They go to another nephrologist, and the nephrologist, let's get you transplanted. What's taken so long, right? So that there are plenty of obstacles, but usually at transplant centers, and this is, I think, what Melissa was talking about, there's a multidisciplinary committee, and it's usually made of a surgeon, a transplant nephrologist, a dietitian, a social worker, perhaps a nurse, and they review all these applications to get listed by their center. And so in a sense, you have to get past that. And they too are subjective. Now, there's definitely some definite no-nos. There are definitely people who are too old, too sick to handle a transplant. They've got too many comorbid conditions that no transplant center.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but look, we had one young lady I had the pleasure of meeting at the AAKP, Shamika Osborne Jones out of Florida. She says, true, I've been rejected by one transplant center and accepted at another.
Right.
David, why is this happening in your opinion?
So
why is this happening?
Okay, so it's complicated, but there's a couple of reasons. Up until a couple of years ago, all transplant centers, their money and their kind of scorecard by Medicare was tied by how long that organ lasted in these recipients, right? So that biased transplant centers to say, hey, we only want the the Michael Phelps of transplant candidates, right? We want the people who are in the best shape, who are going to last as long as possible. And of course, the dialysis companies, their money is tied, or their scorecard is basically how long can you keep someone alive on dialysis? And so there's competing interests there, because often the very best people who are candidates for transplant are people that they might want to keep on dialysis, because they'll say, hey, if we got a Michael Phelps here, he's going to last 20 years on dialysis, right? And so that'll make us look good.
Wow. And that's true, because there's people who've been on dialysis 15, 20, 25 years that may not even been on the transplant list.
Right. I mean, it's possible. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation and misconceptions about transplant. It's definitely, there are risks to everything. But your risks of staying on dialysis are so much higher than your risks of being transplanted. And, in terms of quality of life, other comorbid problems and longevity, how long you're expected to live. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue, and I kind of am torn to a certain degree, because somebody just like the God Committee has to make these types of decisions, right? There has to be, if you have a limited number of organs, if we put aside living donation, if you have a limited number of organs, then somebody has to decide who gets it, right? And medical professionals are probably the best suited to do that. But at the same time, there is no consensus across transplant centers across our country about what is, how to at least even think about this, right? There's no, across the board consensus. I mean, think about it. The SATs, I think, were just thrown down the drain by the University of California. Maybe the whole country, I don't know, but definitely the University of California. Doesn't even require them anymore. But to a degree, that was a way to distinguish, all these people, all these students, in terms of what school they could get into. There had to be some methodology, regardless of whether you were good at the SATs, mediocre or bad. If you compared everybody with, there's so many people with an A report card or an A GPA, that to a degree, you need somebody to filter, and triage people and where they should go. But with that said, I know that I've talked to a lot of transplant patients, and they call it cherry picking, which is, these.
Oh yeah, I got yeah.
And so when
they do that with dialysis patients too.
Sorry, what?
No, I said they do that with some dialysis patients.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that too.
Get their treatment. Like if it's a patient that has private insurance or Medicare or Medicaid, and they maybe have one chair available, and they got 3 patients, they will pick the person with the private insurance,
of course,
over. Yeah. So that's some form of cherry picking as well, because everyone needs the treatment. Those 3 people, the one with Medicaid, the one that may have Medicare, and then the one that has top-notch private insurance. And if it's only one chair available, and see, a lot of patients don't know that. And I mean, of course, the clinics are not going to tell them, but that's how they do it. They get the one with the Blue Cross or Blue Shield or whatever.
I've heard that story too. Yeah, I mean, it's for the transplant centers that are less, that perform less transplants per year, like the small centers, are probably apt to be even more conservative, because if there is something bad that happens, they can't say, oh, this is 1 out of 100. It'd be like maybe 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10. And so that makes them even more cautious about who they allow onto the list in their center. Now, if you ask some nephrologists, they'll say, hey, really good nephrologists who are passionate about transplant, they'll say, hey, the issue isn't us not referring, it's that the transplant centers aren't taking the people that we're referring. We may say, hey, we look at a patient, they might be kind of obese, but we may think, hey, this patient still would be much better with a transplant than on dialysis, and they'll get rejected. And so it's a frustration for them.
Right. I was just reading something somebody posted about Dr. Akuza. But anyway, it was a comment in the comment box. But David, talk about celebrities in particular, like Selena Gomez, where they may get diagnosed, and then they're able to get, if they have someone to get tested, they can get tested in 1 day and get that process straight through. Share a little bit about the disparity between that and the average patient with kidney disease looking for a transplant.
Well, look, and I'm definitely glad Selena Gomez got a transplant. I think she's super talented. But what happens? Oh yeah, whatever Melissa's saying. We'll talk about that in a second, Melissa. But it would be, in my opinion, unthinkable for Selena Gomez's doctor or George Lopez's doctor to say, hey, to not really inform them about living donation. I think we in America would have a problem seeing Selena Gomez, rightfully so, on dialysis for 2-3 years. And she was obviously educated well by her doctors. And in an interview she gave with her donor, the donor said that they did the workup in about a day, I think, and it usually takes months. And this was to prevent her from having to go on dialysis in the first place. So it was a preemptive transplant, but she was weeks away from dialysis. And I don't think that same type of concern is had for a lot of people across our country, particularly when doctors or clinics don't feel that they're going to be held accountable. Which is not to say that there's a ton of great kidney doctors, and I've met them, and they're passionate about transplant. But there are plenty of doctors, unfortunately, that aren't, that have the wrong, I mean, the incentives of it kind of make it. I talk about this a lot in my project, as you know, but the incentives often are deterrent from doctors educating patients about Medicare. About transplant.
Right. Let me ask you a question. Do you think it could be pushing the envelope to maybe going against the Hippocratic Oath?
No, yeah, of course. The Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah, Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah, of course. Did you have to take a Hippocratic Oath in nursing school?
Well, not like doctors, but it's more or less like
same thing, right?
Yeah, like the Board of Nursing has a book of ethics,
right?
But
I do think that there are a lot of, I mean, and this goes well beyond kidney doctors, but there are certainly many kidney doctors across our country that defy their Hippocratic Oath. And I've talked to a ton of patients who should have been transplanted already. I talked to a wonderful girl down in Florida. She is now on her third nephrologist because she couldn't get information out of the first two. She's finally listed not just at one center, but two centers, which is another thing that people should know, is that you can actually register at multiple centers and register in centers out of state. So if Wyoming or
wouldn't they have to have the funds to fly there and
absolutely,
yeah.
So that is that's a luxury that a lot of people don't have, which is the ability to live in Wyoming for weeks, or to live wherever the transplant weight is the lowest in whatever region, and get listed there. So you first have to fly out, then you got to get evaluated. Then if you get evaluated, then they'll call you when they think you're, when you're at the top of the list, and you got to go out there and recover there. So it's something that 95% or more of our dialysis patient population doesn't have the ability to do. Most of these patients, as you know, are on Medicare. They can't work. They're too sick to work. And it's unfortunate. Now, somebody, I don't know if it was Melissa or somebody, posted something about fundraising.
Right. And then she just put this up, David.
Yeah. I tried to get listed in Georgia and Michigan, Florida resident, and was told I don't have a secondary insurance and they wouldn't even evaluate me. Yeah. So, yeah.
David,
so a lot of
go ahead and mention what you're saying.
Yeah. So a lot of transplant centers, and I'm not totally sure why. I've been told that a lot of patients are forced to fundraise so that they can afford immunosuppressive drugs 3 years down the road. So the reasoning for this is that Medicare will cover your immunosuppressive drugs after transplant for 3 years, and then they cut you off. But these drugs are thousands of dollars. And so what happens is there are some transplant centers across the country that will require a patient to have $5,000, $10,000 in their bank account to show that they can afford these drugs. But really, the problem there is, if you are chronically sick, A, how are you supposed to get that money? And B, is it fair to say that you won't be able to work after you have a transplant, and you won't be able to afford these drugs, and you won't be able to get private insurance once you're able to work again, once you have a transplant. So it basically widens the gap that already exists, the racial and socioeconomic gap regarding access to transplant that already exists, because you're basically saying that poor people, or people that don't have, $5,000-$10,000 in the bank, which is most of America, let alone the chronically sick, that they can't get access to the better of two treatments because they don't have the money. Which, if you ask most doctors, they'll say that's nonsense. And certainly, I'm sure that there has been some studies done which show after 3 years there's a drop in people that have to go back on dialysis because they're forced to choose between whatever food and medicine. But in that situation, you are still discriminating against poor people. And it's like, I know somebody who could not, for the life of him, fundraise. But now he works full time. Finally got a transplant, went to a different center, finally got a transplant, works full time, has private insurance, and is able to afford the medications. So just to say, hey, your bank account now is a perfect reflection of what it'll be like, 3 years from now. No one can predict that future. I mean, God, who could have predicted that we would be in this national pandemic now? How many people a year from now thought their bank accounts would be as low as they are now? You can't predict the future like that. And that's what they're doing. And, they could pick someone who's wealthy and say, hey, great, that person loses their house. Maybe they get a divorce. They lose their house, they lose their business, they go broke, and now they can't afford it. So to me, it's a pretty awful, sad way of doing business.
Wow. Now, David, in your opinion, there's more people on the transplant list that are in the donor pool. Do you think we will ever catch up?
Well, there is one country that doesn't have a wait list.
What country is that, David?
That's Iran. And the reason why is because they have the only legal market for a kidney. You can buy a kidney there. And so they don't have a wait list there. They're the only country that doesn't.
Wow. I heard Iran does that. Now,
yeah. I mean, there's a ton of really well-known economists, and economists are great for being more objective, right? To just kind of look at the numbers and the data. And there's a lot of economists that think that's something that we should do. However, there are definitely some doctors that don't think it's a good idea because they think that will exploit the poor. But it'll also help the poor. So, we don't have to do things the way that Iran does it. And I'm not suggesting I have the answers. But to me, we should be doing more than we are. And that first starts with education. And there is a humongous education problem with regards to educating dialysis patients about transplant. If they don't, I went to a clinic in Georgia, and I asked the dialysis director, and I said, hey, how many of these patients know what a transplant is at the moment they start dialysis? And she said the majority of them don't know. So if you don't know what a transplant is,
wow,
you're not educated about it, how can you do due diligence and try to find a living donor?
David,
Selena,
we have a question for you from Melissa. She says, David, what do you think of an opt-out system rather than the current donor registration process?
Okay. So the opt-out system, do you want to explain it or do you want me to?
No, you go. I don't know about it. So you go ahead, bro.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So currently, right now, when someone dies, we have an opt-in system, meaning the patient and his or her family have to agree to allow the deceased's organs to be harvested. So the kidneys, the heart, liver, everything. And what an opt-out system means is there is an implicit there's an implicit agreement with society that when people die, the state is allowed to harvest their organs if they can, without asking. And the idea is, we wouldn't lose as many organs, that are sitting on ice, or they can't, we would just have more available if it was implicitly stated that everybody was a donor rather than having to opt in, because it really is a race like you've never seen. Once a person dies, then they're contacting their next of kin. Hold on, I get people sending messages all the time. They contact their next of kin, and they have to talk to them, and then they basically go down this list of who is next on the list. And you get a doctor on the phone and they say, no, this organ's not good. Maybe they're waiting for a better organ, right? Maybe this is from a 70-year-old instead of 30-year-old. And then it goes down to the next doctor. And there are hospitals that will take kidneys that have been out of the body on ice for 30-something hours.
Wow.
Right.
But a lot of people don't know that. And
right.
And maybe couldn't that, if that is the case, couldn't that possibly be maybe a contributing factor when someone does get the transplant, that say, quote, because this does happen a lot. Yeah. They got a sleepy kidney. Well, the kidney doesn't open up right away, but it takes several days and it slowly starts to work. Right. But I'm not saying that's the reason for that, but if you have an organ outside the body on ice with no blood going through it for up to 36 hours or how many hours? Right. I mean, that organ.
So basically, dying taxes organs, and they've done, the last I heard by Al Roth, who is a Nobel laureate, who's done a lot of studying on this, like I have. He said that they haven't found any deleterious effects of 8 hours and under. And so that's the beautiful thing about living donation, is that these organs are good because they don't go through that death, and they're not out of the body for nearly as long. You can, even if you fly an organ across the country, it's out of the body for maybe 6-8 hours. And it's planned, right? They know who it's going to. So, so there's not this frantic race that exists. Did I digress? Did I answer the question? What was the question?
No, absolutely. Absolutely, man. I mean, so I was asking about catching up.
Catching up to what?
As far as the organs. I mean, we talked about the opt-out with Melissa, but I was talking about, do you think we'll ever catch up as far as maybe turning that around of having, I know.
It's possible. It's definitely possible. Like I said, Iran doesn't have an issue, which doesn't mean that we have to do everything the way that Iran does it. If we align the incentives of our system to get people transplanted from the get-go, from the primary care doctor notices, oh, you've got a problem, then, and the education starts there, then yeah, we could, there are tons and tons and tons of people who want to be kidney donors, but they won't do it unless they know. They won't do it unless they hear about somebody's story and their need. So I just
say that again. You said there's tons and tons of people that want to be a kidney donor, but why?
They will do it. They will do it. They're predisposed to doing it.
Oh,
so,
predisposed.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. In other words, there are some people who are born with that incredible humanitarianism, right? That sense of altruism. And it's something, there are a lot of donors that have to convince their spouses, hey, this is something I want to do. And if their spouses sometimes are like, hell no, you're not. And eventually they do, and they do it. But these people only step up to the plate if they know that someone's pitching. Right?
Wow. So let me ask you this. With that being said, what do you suggest to the thousands or the people who watch our shows that are seeking a kidney transplant?
Education. First and foremost, educate. The main difference between those that get transplanted and those that don't are those that are persistent and that they know their stuff, like Melissa, who's been commenting on stuff on the screen.
Right.
You have to know the system that you're in, and you have to be persistent. If you get turned down by one center, go to another. Figure out whatever you have to do. If you're on dialysis, your first goal in life should be to get a transplant. I've seen too many people on dialysis that they feel chronically sick. They can't work. They're lying in bed. They can barely eat. They're nauseous. They can't work. And then you compare that to the people I know that have gotten transplanted, and they're swimming, they're walking, they're working full time, sometimes more than full time. I just produced this series, which I think will be rolled out into some transplant centers, called "Having Your Donor Find You." And the whole purpose of this series is to educate people on dialysis who are at transplant centers, or even people, hopefully, that haven't been listed yet, about how to share their story that they need a kidney. And if they do, I think it's a matter of time and a matter of numbers. It's like asking a girl out. Like, yes, you're never gonna get, a date with every girl that you want, right? And I figured that out as a teenager, right? But it's a numbers game. And if you ask out, if you keep on being persistent, there will finally be somebody that says, David Krissman, you are attractive. I don't know what all those other girls are thinking, but you are, right? And that's the same thing about transplant and finding a living donor, or even getting into a transplant center. You have to be persistent. Because
now, let me ask you this. But I worked in dialysis over 33 years.
Yeah.
And I've met many dialysis patients that were great candidates for a transplant, but because they seen someone else at the dialysis center get a transplant and it rejected, or they came back maybe 4 months later or a year later,
Right.
and they seen that and it discouraged them from wanting to do that. How do one break away from that? So
Education. Education. So the people, if you're on dialysis, the only people that you're going to see of those that got transplanted are those people where the transplant didn't work. The minority of people that went into rejection fast. But so they're going to end up on dialysis. So you're going to see them again. You're going to be like, I don't want anything to do with that. But the statistics are that people do much, much better. You won't find a doctor in the country. You might find a few, but the overwhelming consensus is that transplant is the way to go. And the reason why you're not seeing those people is because they're not back on dialysis. So
wow. Yeah, man, very interesting. Very interesting. So
about the opt-out, opt-in system.
Sure.
I don't think I ever answered that. The answer is I don't know. I've heard researchers basically say both. That so like Spain has the highest percent of people who get transplanted.
Really?
Yeah. And I think they have an opt-out system. But I've also heard interviews where people who would know say they still ask the next of kin. So even though they have an opt-out system, I would say an opt-out system is better, but that's something that society has to choose because, you know, when you donate your organs and you're deceased, they're harvesting them, they're cutting them out. And so that has to be a societal value that we accept. That if you die and we can and you can save somebody else's life, we're going to.
Wow. So David, I know we're coming down to about the hour, man. It's been very, very stimulating, exciting conversation. Where do we go from here as the kidney disease community as a whole moving forward? Because let me say this while I still have it on my mind. In This Life documentary, I watched it, and one of the doctors on there mentioned, this is back in the 60s, said prevention and education was the key. And we're talking about something back then was so small. I mean, in 74, 11,000 people. So in the 60s, I'm sure it maybe was less than 11,000 people. But if you're looking at, say, 5,000 people on dialysis, and the doctor is saying, or the gentleman who the researcher, whoever says that education and awareness is key, and now 2007, you ballooned up to 527,000 people. Where did the education ever go?
600,000 people. And it's because our system doesn't incentivize it. We have a fee-for-service disease management system. You know, we don't have a system in our country, unfortunately, that incentivizes not just doctors, but education about exercising and eating healthy and avoiding these conditions that cause diabetes and hypertension. And so, I mean, that's why the work that you're doing, I think, is super important. But I think to make a huge difference, I think we as a country really need to take a look in the mirror and say, what are our values? Is it do we want a country that is a fee-for-service system where the healthcare sector is literally 17-18% of our whole GDP? Or do we want, a system that incentivizes keeping people out of the hospital and keeping people healthy and not just treating diseases?
You're absolutely right.
So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, man. So again, before we end, where do we go from here, David?
What we really need, in my opinion, is a single payer healthcare system where the incentives of doctors and our healthcare professionals are aligned with keeping people well. And it's not, when I say that, it's not like I think that doctors, I think the majority of doctors are good people and they go into medicine to help people. But I think that when you have a system that you're one small person in this humongous system that doesn't incentivize it, that incentivizes get in, get out, get in, get out, with this patient and that patient, this patient, that patient. It's the difference in somebody knowing that their obesity is causing, and the way they're eating is causing healthcare issues. And that over the years, if they do not get a handle on it, then they're going to end up on dialysis. So yeah, I mean, I think, look, I don't have the full answer to healthcare. Is very complicated, and it would certainly change a humongous sector of our society, and it would have to be done gradually over time. But I don't think anybody in their right mind is thinking, hey, we're doing a great job, we should just keep on going, with the way that we are, because of these statistics, that there are way more people that are going on dialysis every year that they can even transplant.
It's true. Wow. Now, David, before we go, I know you do a lot of research and a lot of projects, and sometimes you look for, I don't want to call them subjects, but people to hear their life experience or whatever. Do you want to make a plea right now to anyone you may need for a future project or
anybody who's listening to this is free to contact me on Facebook, which is probably where you're watching it now. Feel free to contact me if you have questions. I'd love to hear your story. I'm working on, like I said, an investigative podcast now. If you think that if you think that your story is interesting, I would certainly love to hear it. But if all you need is some advice, guidance, I would be happy to give it to you. And if I can't, I'll find somebody who can.
No, absolutely. David the Beast, I'm telling you, he's a great writer. Just amazing. You are just an amazing person, man. Again, I'm just glad.
Don't make me blush.
No, I'm just glad we connected, man. Really, because when you first contacted me, I didn't know anything what was going on, and then we got into discussion.
Yeah.
And I was, more than willing to help you learn anything you needed to know.
Right.
Especially with kidney disease or transplant, or just try to connect you, with people who can share their experience.
Yeah, I knew nothing about this. And, in 2014, and I just did a lot of research, and I informed myself, and I contacted a lot of doctors. And if I can get them to talk to me, give them, if these doctors are giving me all this time, then they can certainly, if you're persistent, give you time if you're a patient. So ask questions. Don't accept the status quo, because you deserve better.
Right. Okay, one more question. I mean, this conversation could go on, but what about individuals who are at stage 4 and 5 that don't know anything, and when they get into the hospital, they kind of get fast-tracked to dialysis? What about those individuals? I know you said education, but when should it start?
It should start. I mean, look, that's a tricky question, because when people, as you've probably said on this webcast before, a lot of people don't know they have kidney disease until it's too late, and then they end up in the hospital. And so I would say is doctors should try to start educating patients there. Now, if you're in the hospital and you're sick, you may not be, have the mental wherewithal to really learn anything. So that's really a doctor's call. But certainly as soon as possible. I think if this was Canada, it would happen in the hospital, more often than not. Because I've talked to a girl, and that was her case. But a lot of the times they're not going to get, them transplanted in 2 or 3 weeks, and they need to get these people on dialysis. So they inevitably will, be sent to an outpatient clinic and start that journey. But as soon as possible, they should be trying to educate themselves on how they can get a transplant, because the longer you're on dialysis, the worse your prognosis.
Yeah, but David, as you was talking, I was sitting here thinking, I think a lot of doctors should be held accountable, nephrologists, because if you have a person that you're seeing, right, and they say they see him at stage 3 or stage 4, and they're just managing, and the nephrologist don't never say anything about a transplant.
Oh yeah, I've heard that story.
And then the person goes on dialysis, and then someone asks them, "Has anyone told you about a transplant?" And I've done that in patients like, transplant. They look at me like I'm crazy. Like, no, what's that?
Yeah, well, so, it's not just the nephrologist. It's the primary care practitioner. It's their internal medicine doctor. The moment that any doctor realizes, hey, your kidneys are going to fail, they should start that discussion with you. And it may be that you aren't a candidate for a transplant immediately. They may say, well, you're 400 pounds, right? And we can't transplant you. But if you tell them about transplant and about the world of difference it could make in your life, it's incentive. It's saying, hey, I got to lose this weight. If I want to get off this machine, or if I want to avoid dialysis, I got to change my behavior. So I don't think there's any excuse ever to not bring up transplant. Even if for those that have cancer, if you have cancer, no one's going to transplant you because they're afraid that they'll want to see you in remission for a certain amount of years. The last time I checked, it was 5. But even then, they got to know, because that's what's going to happen next, right? That is, after 5 years are up, they're going to want a transplant. And they could get that process going before 5 years is up. It's not like, oh, okay, 5 years. Okay, now let's talk about transplant. No. Right? And then that'll take another year or two or whatever it is. Right?
Right. Prolonging the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. If you make it that long.
Right.
So,
and David, check this out right quick. Florence Bentley Stone, she's a transplant warrior. Hey, Florence, nice to see you. But she said that was me. No education or anything. I was at a loss, starting dialysis, knew nothing about numbers, stats, nothing, just sad. And this is happening to a lot of people. And that's why I believe this show is very important for people to share, so other people who may be in this exact same situation right now can at least have a chance, David, to talk to their physician about transplant. If they haven't heard and they do have kidney disease, they can at least attempt or try to make a turnaround instead of almost like, and I hate to use this analogy, leading the sheep to the slaughter.
Right. Yeah. You know, our healthcare system is complicated. Our country is complicated. And you know what's interesting? I just read this. At the end of World War II, there was the Marshall Plan, and we basically helped Germany and Japan rebuild their countries. And one of the first things we did was we helped them rebuild a healthcare system. So our tax dollars went to funding their healthcare system, where everybody has universal access, whereas the healthcare system here it's far from the case. So, you know, people are uninsured or underinsured. You know, I think
crazy. It's sickening to hear that the U.S. tax dollars.
I just read that. Yeah.
Wow.
No, I mean, it's great for them, but
it's bad for us.
Yeah, I mean, look, we need to prioritize. Hold on 1 second.
All right.
Hold on 1 second. Oh, so my father's locked out, and he needs me to open the door. I'm going to open the door for a second.
All right.
Or do you want? Yeah. Okay. Hold on. I'll be right back.
All right, Dave. So, guys, just hold on. Dave, be right back. Hey, James, thank you for watching. We definitely have a serious issue with doctors, education, patients, and with how doctors communicate. They speak above. James, you're right, and that's why I'm so glad you have your show. David.
Yeah.
I just wanted to read this comment again while you're here. This is from James Fabian, aka Dad Vice TV. He's a kidney health coach and kidney disease motivator speaker. He has up to 60, it may be even more, maybe 70, 80,000 YouTube subscribers. And man, he's a beast. He went from a GFR of 6 or 8 to 30 something or 37. Just changed his diet, his lifestyle. Never been on dialysis, no transplant, and he just turned his life around and doing amazing things.
Yeah, I mean, we need to, like you. First of all, that guy should contact me. I'd love to get a hold of him. If he's got that many subscribers, I would love to chat with him. But like you said, and like what you're trying to do, first it starts, I mean, it's all about education, whether it's educating people about what to eat, to exercise, and then, you know, if they do fall through the cracks, for our doctors to educate them about all their treatment options, and be frank about what's good and what's not.
David, I stand corrected. He said he will, and it's 85,000.
Oh, okay. Well,
but when he came on our show, maybe in March or something like that, he had 43. So he gained like 40,000 subscribers in like 2 months or something like that. That's amazing.
Yeah, that is
But
amazing.
he said he'll reach out to you.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Hey, Martin and Miss Kathy. But yeah, David, and maybe Melissa should reach out to you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to anybody.
And she said she literally went to college to study medicine so she could understand what doctors were telling her about her condition.
Right. Yeah, it's, you know, we something's got to change. And until that happens, the rest of us have to keep on doing this advocacy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, David, man, this was a great conversation, man, and I would love to bring you on, from time to time to talk about different topics pertaining to kidney disease and your insight on it, because you have a lot, even though that you're not involved as a patient, but your work and everything that you do, man, adds value
I appreciate it.
To this community, man. And then let me see, Miss Kathy, her creatinine was 10. Now it went up. Oh, now it's 3. Uh-oh. I thought it was 13. So it's going down. Wow. Okay. Oh, yeah. So we got to work on that to try to raise it up. Talk with James, Mr. Fabian, and see if we can try to turn that around. But yeah, David, thank you again for
my
coming
pleasure.
on.
Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. And where can people reach you if they wanted to contact you?
Yeah, so I'm not the very best at social media, but I'm active on Facebook, so they can send me a message on Facebook. I do have a YouTube channel, although there's nothing kidney related on that right now.
Sure.
And I do have an Instagram account, so they can reach out to me on that as well.
And it's just David Krissman on Instagram?
Yeah, I think so. But my website's davidkrissman.com. So
okay.
Yeah,
that's so easy to remember.
Yeah, and that has I think my email on it, maybe. I'm not sure. But they can definitely get a hold of me through Facebook too. And then just say that you watch this show, so I know who you are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Lisa Baxter, you should reach out. She's very interesting person. She does a show on Sundays, the Lisa Baxter Show for us. She was on dialysis 12. Now, David, she may be a person you want to talk to because Lisa, she had maybe 6 or 7 siblings on dialysis.
Wow.
And I believe a few passed away, and maybe a couple are still on. And she had a transplant. She was on dialysis 12 years and had a transplant. I guess 3 years now, Lisa. I'm not sure, but she would be someone very interesting to talk to. So
yeah,
Lisa,
I would love to talk to anybody who wants to reach out. Feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. So David, again, man, thank you for coming on. Thank you for inviting me to your house up in Beverly Hills. My first time in Beverly Hills.
And I only did that because when I visit you, you're going to buy me pizza, and that's basically
yeah. Oh, absolutely, man. Especially when all this goes away, man. I definitely look forward to you coming to Washington D.C. And Lisa has 2 aunts and uncle, mother-in-law. Wow. So, but yeah, man, that was my first time out in Beverly Hills. Really enjoyed.
I'm usually not here, but I'm quarantining with my parents, so I don't have to be alone.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you was there that time. Gave me an opportunity to ride up there and just see those lovely homes.
It's a beautiful area.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Enjoy. And again, man, I'll be reaching out to you. You know how we do. And thank you again. A lot of people thanking you for the great information. I knew this would be a great show. You coming on, sharing your experience, especially talking about the God Committee and your podcast and just all the amazing things you do for our humanitarian
the
work.
podcast that I'm doing basically takes a look at how we treat kidney failure in our country, and which is basically the only experiment the U.S. has with universal healthcare. And it takes a look at how that story went and what lessons we can take to the larger system. And hopefully I'll be coming out with that in this year, hopefully.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Great, man. So, all right, David, I'll be in touch because David's my mentor as well as I slowly work on my short, small documentary, Urban Crisis. I had the blessing of having David mentor me, man. Again, I'm so humbled to have met you, to know you. And, man, God bless you. And I'll be talking with you soon, David.
Thanks for doing all your work.
All right. Thank you, man. Take care. Right. Tell your parents. Don't forget to tell them hello.
I will. I definitely will.
Okay, man. Take care.
Okay. Bye. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Guys, this was a great show. Now, look, what we're trying to do is bring more exciting topics, important topics that impact kidney disease patients or patients with any chronic diseases. We're trying to reach out past, like with Warriors Quest, to not just kidney warriors, but people who looking for lung transplant, liver. We got to be in this together because education is really the key. It really is. And all we want to do is educate so people who are afflicted with kidney disease, whether having a transplant or you're on the machine, home or outpatient, or you're in one of the stages of kidney disease, we still want you to live your best life in spite of. And those who are believers, God is not through with you yet. Okay, we all have our struggles. I even have my struggles, and I'm not embarrassed to share that. That's why I didn't do the show Tuesday. I have my own medical struggles, but through the grace of God, I'm able to be here tonight to share David's story and to share what he does and to talk about the God Committee. And at one time, that's how dialysis was, and it's not like that now. But however, as David mentioned, in the transplant arena, it has to be equal. And that's where we're falling short. So for those who have gotten transplant, God bless you. Those who are waiting for transplant, God bless you. Those who had transplant and rejected, God bless you. We're all in this together, whether we're advocating or you're on the other side as a kidney warrior or a family member of a kidney warrior. We're going to be here for you and do our best to help you live the best life you can live. Thank everyone for watching. Melissa Tuff. Tune in next Tuesday, guys, because Melissa Tuff is going to be on World Kidney News sharing her story and what she went through and what she's doing to stay positive with her motivational quotes and her readings and how she lives the best life she can live while she's in search of a kidney transplant. And Miss Kathy, we're going to definitely be praying for you down in Louisiana. Denise, thank you for watching. Love you, Miss Kathy. You know, reach out to me if you need my, not my advice, but any suggestions or anyone we can connect you to help you transition. If it goes that way, we're still going to keep you in prayer. And also reach out to Dad Vice TV. I know you mentioned about the diabetes, but if we can try to help curb that A1C to prolong it, we're going to do it. Lisa, thank you for watching. As always, Shamika, God bless you. Thank you. Haven't seen you in a minute, but thank you for watching. Let me see anybody else. I don't want to miss no one. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Nikki, thank you for watching. Miss Judy, thank you. God bless you. Shamika, Miss Patricia, thank you for watching as well. And everyone else who's watching on the private feed, on the watch parties that I did, I wanted to create many watch parties so everyone can see what's happening with kidney disease and transplant. It's not always, apple pie, nice and pretty. As much as we want to be, if this was a perfect world, it would be like that. But no, we want to give you the good, the bad, the ugly of kidney disease. Because if you're informed or if you're educated, you can make a well-informed decision on your life. And that's all we want to do, is present the good, the bad, the ugly, everything that deals with kidney disease, transplant, home dialysis, in-center kidney disease, everything about it. So if you find yourself in this situation, then you are well educated enough to make an informed decision. I'll say this and then I'll say good night. When I first started dialysis in 1985, I was 21 years old, fresh out of the Army as a combat cavalry scout, served up on the East-West German border when it was up. For a lot of people maybe watching, they probably don't even or never even heard of the East-West German border and the minefield between the fences of East and West Germany. And as a 21-year-old, after getting out of the military, no healthcare experience, nothing, and was blessed to get a job and then, go to school for medical assistant. Come on, a black guy, 21, just getting out of the military. How do you go from driving bus, security job, to thinking about seeing a commercial on TV about medical assistant and saying, I can do that? I mean, I wouldn't have never known in my wildest dream that I would be here today as a dialysis. But I say all that to say, when I started dialysis in 85, and when I first seen that blood and I first worked on a patient, I always said, day one, I'm going to treat that person as how I want to be treated if I was sitting in that chair, because the tables could have been turned the other way. I could have been born and been on dialysis. My destiny couldn't have been high school and then going into the military right after high school and what I went through. I could have been born. In fact, this is how God works. Before I went into the military, when I signed up on the reserve entry program at 16, 17 years old, I had protein in my urine. I had protein in my urine at 17. And to go in the military as a combat soldier and then get out, do odd jobs, security, school bus driver, working in the warehouse. And then one day, me and my wife, I'm sitting in the living room watching TV in the 80s. And next thing I know, commercial come on for Capital City Trade and Technical School for a medical assistant. No, nothing about that. And then 2 months into it, I go to the job placement lady 1985, right? And ask her, is there any work or do you know a job high so I can get on the job training as a medical assistant? She gives me this address to Austin Diagnostic Clinic, West 34th Street in Austin, Texas. Didn't even know anything about dialysis, and lady interviewed me named Gladys Houston, right? You know, back then the technician and the nurses had their own supervisor. So head tech, she was black, her name was Gladys Houston, hired me, right? And then 3 weeks in my training, my grandfather died, and I had to fly back to Washington, D.C., right? 1985. And she let me do that. And I'm 3 weeks in training. They could have fired me. And you're talking about orientation. And, you know, I latched on to this job, you know, setting up the machines, doing training. I'll never forget me and another gentleman named Sid Shanae from Louisiana, a short black guy. And he always taught, and I taught. But the one thing about it, I can talk and set up my machines at the same time. And he couldn't. And I never forget, no one shut up. One day during the training, they made this man work. He worked the whole day, right? And then they fired him. I mean, it's funny now. It wasn't funny then because I thought I was next. But they fired the brother, right? And I'm just saying, guys, if you knew my story from starting dialysis up until this point, and what I went through and how God works, I'm not no saint, you know. Throughout my life, you know, drugs, alcohol, but just if you knew how God worked and how I matriculated from, you know, $4.18 an hour in 1985 to actually making up to $60 an hour as a nurse, to now just getting completely no income. But God is still good, and I ain't mad at him. But yes, I don't know how. I know how I got here through him, but I'm going to continue to do what he has me to do, to educate, give out the information that I was blessed to be instilled with, and just keep doing what I'm doing to save people, to expose the injustice of these clinics and what they do, how they blackball people. And a lot of people, I'm going to share this, and like I said, I know it's going to shut up, but we're going to do a show next week on Urban Reno Talk with Tamika and Steve. We're going to actually have an ex-social worker that got blackballed by DeVita because she was in a hospital, right? And had a racist FA. But the point is, if you blackball a person for no reason and that person can't go to another facility, whether it's a dietitian, a charge nurse, a social worker, a regular nurse, technician, what happens, guys, is stuff falls through the cracks. And that's why I said in my post today, the patient suffers. Because now patients supposed to get care plans done. Certain information required by Medicare is supposed to be done each month. And a lot of that stuff is fabricated. I'm just going to say it. You may not know it. I worked for these companies for 34 years. I've been on the inside. And not proud to say that I participated in these type of deliberate actions to make their numbers look good because I didn't know any better. But now I know better, so I do better. And that's why educating yourself when you're on dialysis is very important, that you know that you're supposed to have a care plan meeting with the nurse, the doctor, the dietitian, and the social worker. It's certain things, certain education, patient educations that's supposed to be done every month. The fire drill education, the emergency takeoff. There's a lot of things that just get signed that patients don't know about. They just get misdone. And it's not right. It's not right. Even the grievances. If you got a grievance, say you have a grievance against a technician, you want to know what's being done, and the person come out and say, oh, I talked to him. There don't nothing go in their records. Next time you come in, you still see this person, or they working on you after they may have infiltrated you or did something unintentionally. I'm not going to say intentionally, but unintentionally, but maybe because they weren't paying attention to what they were doing. That happens. Medical mistakes happen in dialysis. And if it haven't happened to you, God bless you, and I hope He continue to cover over you. But on the other side of it, I know many patients that experience medical mishaps on dialysis because people weren't paying attention. And so with that being said, I'm going to stop my rant because I know that's what it sounds like, but I'm so damn passionate of what I do because it could be my mom, my dad, right? One of my family members on dialysis, or even myself. And I'm not immune to it. I got stage 1 kidney disease, and it's in check. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen down the line. I'm 56 years old. And so that doesn't mean 5, 10, 15 years from now that something can't come and strike me and put me in the same position of people that I'm trying to educate. So I'll never put myself apart and say it can't happen to me, because yes, it can happen to Steve as well. It can happen to any one of us. So, you know, I didn't mean to go on this rant, but you know, when I just think about this journey and where I'm at and what I'm just trying to do, this never was my intention, guys. You know, after the military, this was never my intentions to do what I'm doing right now. Even in dialysis, I go get paid, come home, and I'm glad God did this, but I don't know why it got to this point. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Please, guys, educate yourself if you're on, off dialysis about kidney disease and what you can do. As they say with the COVID virus, let's flatten the curve with transplant and kidney disease. Let's flatten that curve from it being the 9th leading cause of death in the United States. Let's flatten the transplant curve from having more people needing a kidney than less donor pool. Let's flatten that plan. Thank you, Melissa. And I'm not sure. I think you read Ayanna Van Zant. I used to read her stuff back in the 90s as well. But yes, I can't wait to have you on, Melissa. Absolutely. And yeah, see? Now, let me just say this. Melissa says, indeed, I was labeled a problem patient for asking questions. They kept sticking me in the isolation room so I couldn't read rebel rouse. Yes, I'm glad you said that. Thank you. Because looking at Melissa, Melissa's a very positive person. She was on one of our shows, I believe Uncle Jim or Warriors Quest. She was on one of our shows, but Melissa is a very positive person. And how can she be labeled as a problem patient just for asking questions? This is what happens. And this is why we encourage people to do ask questions, because you have that right. Rights and responsibilities. You have more rights than you know. You just got to execute them and stick up for them and bring in. Sometime the network will help and sometime they won't. It's just how this industry is. But we're going to make sure. You would think and I'm going to shut up, that organizations such as, and I'm not taking anything because they educate, like kidney.org and American Kidney Foundation, National Kidney Foundation, that, they would do education seminars about the subjects that we talked about tonight. The God Committee, what they were, and the trailblazing of dialysis, and give education and transplant and just everything that we're trying to do to push this movement forward. Because again, this is appalling. From 11,000 patients in 1974 at a cost of $229 million till about now, let's take it 220, it's up to 600,000. And it's on here in 2007, it says 23 billion. It's like 80 billion. So we got to flatten the curve, y'all, on kidney disease. That's going to be my new motto: flatten the curve with kidney disease. Not just COVID. Let's flatten the curve with kidney disease. Don't nobody take that and go get no t-shirt made. And if you do, you say you got it from Steve Belcher, because I just made that up. And for the 9 people who watching, this is proof that I came up with that idea. But no, I don't care if you use it, but if you use it and you get paid, or you turn it into a revenue making money maker, cut your boy a little piece of the pie so I can continue to live, or get a job to support your boy. But yeah, let's flatten the curve with kidney disease, guys. Again, thank you guys for watching. This has been an awesome show. This has been a blast. I enjoyed it. Thank you for keeping me in your thoughts and prayers through my illness. I'm about 95, 98%, and just got to change my diet, get back into working out, and just clear my mental focus. I'm going to tell you, mental health is very, very important. And if you suffer from it, don't be ashamed. We all deal with some type of mental anxiety or whatever the case may be. I know I sure do. And, I'm just going to continue to pray and ask y'all for prayers, and read, positive quotes, and include positive people in my life, meditate, and go from there. Thank you, Miss Kathy. I love you. I appreciate you. And I'm definitely going to make it down to Louisiana to see you. I'm telling you, I will be there. I don't know when, but it's going to be soon. Again, thank you so much. I will pray. And again, thank you guys for watching. God bless you, and have a great weekend. We see you this Sunday. We're going to have a great show. I'm going to have Cassandra Floyd, dietitian. She has a great story. She's not just an ordinary dietitian with a ordinary story. She's got a great story, and you're going to want to hear it this Sunday, 9 o'clock on World Kidney News. Thank you guys for watching. God bless you. Hey, Martin, thank you guys. Have a great weekend. Peace and blessings.
Oh, I've been walking beneath streetlights. I've been walking, cause I can't find peace on these nights. I've been walking, but my strides are getting slower. Still I'm walking, but I don't know where I'm going. I've been looking for love, but only found deception. Told my
This is the Polish Ambassador, featuring the Grouch and Scott Nice. Don't get it twisted.
I might be conscious, still I like to fuck.
I like it.
Do a little yoga, then lift some weights up. I be as I'm supposed to, perfectly imperfect. Indulge in deep combo, get hyped when she's